Welcome to Life Happens, where Texans come to protect their legacy and prepare for the second half of life. Join your host, Attorney Kim Hegwood with Hegwood Law Group, and our weekly guest as we navigate the challenges that emerge as life happens. Now here's your host, Kim Hegwood.
Good morning and welcome to Life Happens with me, Kim Hegwood. And we have again back with us, we're so excited, Leah Stanley. Good morning.
Good morning, Kim. It's so great to be here. Thanks for having me.
And so we're going to do some more topics because this is all the things that, is really important. With my elder law practice, helping caregivers is huge, and a lot of times it's family. So we see a lot of them. And, so for me, education is important. We do it in all aspects of our law practice. But today we're going to talk about really encouraging, educating, and empowering caregivers. And that, is important to me, but it's really important to you. So tell our listeners why.
I laugh and tell people when this thing hit me, this caregiving thing hit me, I knew exactly nothing. If it was possible to quantify what I knew in negative numbers, I would have been in the negative numbers. And so I had to learn really, really fast. And that kind of looking back on that, thinking, gosh, that was scary. That was awful. My attitude, particularly in writing my book, was I don't want anybody to ever be caught off guard the way I was. And then suddenly they're up to their necks in everything they've got to learn. So I would like the opportunity. I thought, well, I'm going to write my story down. I'm going to let people see what it looked like when somebody didn't know what to do and what we went through trying to get to that point of taking care of my grandparents. They were both diagnosed with dementia, 2 different types, on the same day. So I had not just 1, but 2. And so when you get hit with double duty, that was ugly. That was really, really awful. And wanting to do the right thing for them, loving them, caring about them, wanting to do the right thing, and just feeling so ignorant. So yes, education is a huge deal for me personally.
Yeah, I feel your pain. I tell most people that I learned elder law the hard way, taking care of my grandparents. Mm-hmm. And so all those things that, they thought they did right because they didn't know, that we had to go back and fix and take care of. And, my first firing probably was caregivers more so than employees. And so just lots and lots of struggles, initially until I got a good rhythm, so that things worked out, a whole lot better. And so, so to kind of help, other people. And so how can, family caregivers, really find encouragement, during, this difficult journey, because it is a difficult journey. I think there's nothing more painful than watching a loved one decline, especially when they were, when you're so used to seeing them, vibrant and alive and doing all kind of fun things, and to have to see that, it is very painful. So what can you do to help with caregivers, how they think and things like that?
I encourage caregivers to not let go of who your loved one was, once upon a time, who you remember them to be. And then suddenly dementia has come in, or some other debilitating disease has come in and kind of made everything take a sharp turn in a direction nobody saw. Try not to constantly visualize that person in that way. I always talk to caregivers and say, try to remember something special that you shared with this person, something that there was a special memory. For me, my grandmother particularly was a storyteller. And when she was just, oh my goodness, she was so advanced with Alzheimer's. It was pitiful. She knew who I was. She knew Leah, but she had difficulty placing me with my father, her son. And it was like she was telling me that she had just put her little son to bed. And it's like, okay, well, see, logically, if he's a little boy, then he couldn't have a daughter, So it's like, you got to push that logic stuff out the window and meet them where they are. But one of the things that I did was engage my grandmother in her storytelling ability. And that was kind of tough. At first, I thought, well, what stories can she remember to tell? Well, the beauty, that's a weird word to use, the beauty of Alzheimer's is while the recent memories go quickly, the short-term memory is pretty much gone. The old memories, the things from the past, way back to their childhood or early adulthood, those memories tend to be the last to go. So what I would do is I would tap my grandma by asking her, hey, have you ever been to the Smoky Mountains? I knew full well she'd been to the Smoky Mountains. How many years ago had she made that trip? And I'd heard all about it. It wasn't that I was not seeking information like, oh, I'm going to plan my own trip there. No. That wasn't the deal. The deal was engagement. Let me engage you in conversation. And it was phenomenal. As advanced as her Alzheimer's was at that time, she was able to engage with me, and her face lit up. She started telling me all about this trip to the Smokies, and then she went on from there telling about other vacations they had taken. She and my grandfather, they loved travel. They would get in the car, and as she called it, they'd ramble all over the place. And so when I could engage her like that, it brought those memories back. And as I said in my book, it's like we were cheating Alzheimer's, and it was glorious. It was just so wonderful. So that's one of the things that I encourage caregivers to do in your flurry of activity, the very harried lifestyle of a caregiver. Take those few minutes and sit down, engage them in a conversation. Even if you're asking them a question about a story that they've told you a gazillion times, it's okay. Go ahead and let them tell you again, and ask questions. Ask questions of them. Oh, did you get to ride the what do they call it? The incline, where you go up the mountain, it's like you're on the ski lift, only it's an enclosed car. I'm trying to think what it's called. But did you get to ride on one of those? And then she would be like, no, we saw it, but we didn't get to do it. And it was just phenomenal. It was like you were having a real conversation. So for me, that was always encouraging when I could tap into that vein of memory and we could walk down that together. That was always special.
So we talk a lot about, as we're, doing caregiving and things like that, having good documents in place. And so because as people start to decline, it's necessary, so I know why it's important for clients to have good, power of attorneys. But how do you feel about it, from your perspective, as a caregiver, having that document in place?
The beauty of it for me was my grandparents had enough foresight to know they needed to see an attorney. So they actually did all of their estate planning about 5 years prior to them actually needing it. So, it was funny because when I became a caregiver, I was 29 years old. I had been a new bride for about 8 months. So I was in a completely different place in my life. I was young. I was looking forward. And all of a sudden, this whole thing dropped in on me. Well, my grandparents had, of course, done this estate planning, and they had provided me copies of the documents. And I had dutifully taken the documents and put them in my desk drawer, and that's where they stayed. And you're rummaging through the desk drawer, and you find these documents, and you're like, oh, yeah, let me just set that aside. I'm looking for something else. I never read the documents. And honestly, the truth is, if I had read them, I would have been absolutely clueless about what it meant. This was one of those, again, like I said, I had to learn on the fly. So when all this happened with my grandparents, and I went to see their attorney, and he gave me the original documents. This was in the old days. I'm sure you remember, Kim, the documents that had the blue backing and all of that. And I mean, this was the original deal, and there was no replacement for it. And so help you, you can't lose it. Well, I mean, I listened to the attorney, and I dutifully, made notes and asked questions and did all that. But it was almost like I was taking a class in college or something. It was like, no, seriously, you need these documents. Let me tell you why they're going to help you. But I didn't understand until I got into the practicality of it. Once I got into that, it was unreal what those documents opened up to me. I mean, I would walk in and I would hold them up. I'd be like, here's my stuff. And they would go, oh, and I could act on behalf of my grandparents. I could get them what they needed, whether it was financial issues at their bank, whether it was healthcare issues with their physician, whatever it was. These documents opened the door, and people would pay attention, not so much to me. It wasn't that I was running in there going, hey, I'm the power of attorney, but I had the paperwork to back it up. And that gave me the authority, as you well know. But from a practical standpoint, I had to learn what those documents did. Again, it wasn't learning, like I say, like taking a class. It was learning on the fly of like, every time I show these documents, people listen to me. People will work with me. And that was monumental to me, because I was told if I had not had those documents, people could have listened to me till the cows came home, but it wasn't going to matter. If I didn't have the authority to act, there wouldn't have been anything that we could have done. And the tragedy of that, I had a doctor in the ER when we were at the very beginning of this thing who looked at me, he said, "You are so blessed that you have these documents. You don't know." He said, "We have people come in here all the time who do not have these documents." And he said, "We can't help them." And I'm just like, oh, that was shocking to me. It was eye-opening. So for me, on my end of it, not necessarily understanding the legal aspect of it from an academic point of view, wow, I found out from a real life practical standpoint, if you don't have those documents, you are in trouble.
Yeah, it's really important. And we like ours, as clients get older, updated more frequently, because financial institutions don't like to take them if they're very old at all. And
Right.
so you want to make sure. And then with my grandfather, one of the financial institutions, made me file it in the real property records before they would recognize it. No problem, because I knew how to do all that stuff. I'm like, I looked at her, I was like, "Are you kidding? You've known me for years. You really want me to do that?" She said, we have to make you. And I'm like, "Not a problem. I'll see you tomorrow." So,
Right.
but it was surprising to, some of the different things that, even, I had to learn, because while I had been preparing these documents for years, it wasn't until I was taking care of my grandparents that I actually had to use one.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was, from a layperson's perspective, it was a little different, because the rules are not the same for every entity at all. So you really have to get a really good education. We use good, powerful power of attorneys a lot to help plan for long-term care. And you probably already know that, that Medicaid is the number one payer for long-term care in this country. But you have to have very specific things in that power of attorney in order to qualify for Medicaid, because you have to be able to do things. You have to be able to, sign the application, gifting if necessary, lots of things that are so necessary, and not everybody needs them. That's not, but lots and lots of people need these specific, provisions. And so when you're planning, what do you tell clients and things like that? If you're planning and Medicaid's in your future, I know what we do. I'm curious to know, when you're talking to clients, when do you tell them to plan, that if Medicaid's their payer for long-term care?
The funny thing about that, I'm sure you've seen this, is people don't always realize. I have people that will contact me, "What do I do?" And they're like, "Well, what kind of money do you have? You're going to need long-term care. Then you're going to have something to pay for it. Because, unless you're going to keep them at home and you're going to pay out of pocket, which is going to get really, really, really expensive, you're going to need a plan." So it's funny how a lot of people, I've seen people, they'll dig in and they'll be like, "Well, I'm not letting mother go to a nursing home. I'm going to keep her here at home." And then, a few months or possibly a year or two into it, they're back looking at you going, what are our other options? And at that point, they're like, "So can we get on Medicaid?" And I'm just like, did you plan for this? Because as you are aware, Medicaid has that picky little 5-year look back period. And that's what I find throws people for the biggest loop. They just think, "Oh, I'm just going to apply today, and I'll get my application in, and I'm going to be approved, and it's all good." Because, mother doesn't have a lot of money. Okay, well, did mother give a gift in the last 5 years of several $1,000s to somebody? And I always tell them, it's like, guess what? Medicaid may want that back, or they may disapprove. They may say, "Nope, we are not going to approve you until 5 years from the date of that gift." And that's what throws people off. They just do not understand. They keep thinking, "Well, I'm going to protect the money." I had one lady tell me one time, "Well, I'm just going to hide the money." And I was just like, well, good luck with that, because they are very thorough. And I just told her, I said, "You don't want to do that." I said, "You're trying to get help here. And if you can consider what Medicaid is to foot the bill for. And that's when I start going through it. It's like your loved ones my grandparents were in a nursing home, so I feel qualified to talk about this. It's not optimal. It's not your fun favorite. It's not the top pick, but it's a reality. For us, it was a reality. My grandparents, I had two at one time. Like I said, I was young. I was in my first apartment with my husband, my new husband. We couldn't do it. So nursing home, that was our option. And they didn't have the money for to have nursing care come in, 24 hours a day. They just didn't have it. So when we went through all that, I have people all the time and they're just like, well, I'll just hide the money. And I'm like, no, you're really not going to do that. They're going to do a very thorough look back. They're going to find if you've done something kind of screwball. Well, one lady said she just wasn't going to report that she had, I'm trying to remember what it was, like stocks or IRA. It was something, it wasn't liquid cash on her, but it was cash that could be made liquid and spent down as part of the Medicaid spend down. She was just going to hide it. And I was just like, you're really not, you're just really not. And if for any weird reason you manage to somehow circumnavigate this, at some point it will come out. And I said, then you risk losing all of it. You risk having this person denied from Medicaid. And I mean, they'll be done. And so, I always encourage it. Find out everything you can. And I always tell people, and of course, you're an attorney, Kim, so you have a lot of people come and sit down and talk to you about this. I tell people all the time, I can give you the 50,000 foot view. I can discuss what I experienced as a caregiver going through it, trying to get my grandparents on Medicaid and things like that. But man, I tell you what, go see an attorney, go talk to somebody that this is what they do. I laugh and say, if you needed to have your appendix out, are you seriously going to take your own kitchen knife and, sterilize it real good under some hot water and take your own appendix out? I don't think so. No. So you go see somebody who's qualified to do that. And it's the same thing here. It's like, don't mess with this because you're playing with someone else's life. That was the kicker for me. It was never about me. It was always about what's the best care for my loved ones, my grandparents. So don't mess with it. Go see somebody that knows.
Well, let me tell you two things that'll help you in the future. The first thing is Social Security already knows where everything is before you apply. They already know. Anything with, they already know. And then the second thing is you have to sign that application under penalty and perjury of law.
Right.
So it's a crime, like a criminal crime to not, to lie on an application, so for us, we want people to plan ahead because what it does is it gives them options.
Right.
I don't care if you don't ever have to use Medicaid. I don't care. You can spend all your money taking care of your loved one. Doesn't bother me at all.
Right.
But I like clients having options. When you don't plan, you're in crisis and there are very little options whatsoever. And it's a more expensive process to do things because, the fees are more and things like that. So it's definitely always better to plan. And so kind of in the scheme of things of, educating caregivers, today, how can we encourage a caregiver to, when they're feeling overwhelmed and help them feel empowered so that they're not having to, so they can get through this and that there's, help and options out there.
Right. There are a multitude of areas to take this in, and I can't tell you the number of caregivers that I've talked to, and it's almost like every single one has a different perspective on this. And they're like, well, I've got it together over here, but I'm really having a trouble over here. And then somebody else is good over here, but they got a problem over there. I am just, like I say, prepared ahead of time. I always encourage people, when we have conferences, when I am hosting a workshop, I always tell people immediately they hear caregiver, they hear dementia caregiving, they think, oh, you want the people that are 65 and up. And I'm like, well, yeah, they're welcome. I'm glad to talk to them. But you know who I really want there? I want people there in my age bracket. I want people in their 40s and 50s. I want the kids to come, the adult kids, you know what I mean? I want the kids to come so they can learn what they need to do right now. Do it now while mom and dad are still in good shape. Do it now while you have, as you said, time to prepare. So that's one of the biggest tools is if we can get people educated and understanding, having to overcome, and I'm sure you deal with this too, Kim, people will say, well, if I do my estate planning documents and I get a will or something terrible might happen. And I look at people and I'm like, you do know what Benjamin Franklin said. If you you fail to plan, then you are planning to fail. Without a plan, you're going to fail. So always to keep people from having that bottom fall out. Now, like I say, for me, I was ignorant. I was unprepared. My grandparents had been through enough life experience that they knew they needed the documentation. I'm not even sure they fully understood all the documents, but they went to an attorney and they had the attorney walk them through what they needed. And he provided everything that they needed. And it was able to see us through, so that when I had to deal with Medicaid, when we had to deal with all of that stuff, I was empowered to act. And that was the greatest blessing. So I always tell people the first thing is, number one, just get educated. That's going to give you a lot of stress relief. Now, for the folks who haven't, when they come and they are just, I had a frantic phone call one time a while back. A lady called and her grandfather was in a very bad way. He was experiencing dementia symptoms, and she calls me up and she's like, we're in his house. We're living in his house. Now, can we get him on Medicaid? And I'm just like, I thought, no, you're going to really have a hard time with this, because I said, does anybody have power of attorney? Well, no. And I was just like, oh Lord. What I tell people in that case is, okay, number one, if there's no power of attorney, you're pretty much going to have to go to court. You're going to have to be named a guardian or get a conservatorship from a judge. And the good news there is that the judge then looks everything over and they appoint you. So if you're appointed, then the good news is you can function with autonomy. You don't need to worry about the voices of the I always laugh and say the weird family members. I had weird family members. So I'm not telling everybody else they had weird family members, but my people were weird. And some of the responses that I had in my situation. But some of these family members that live out on the far branches of the family tree, that they want to come in and suddenly tell you what you're doing wrong or what you should do better or do different. This frustrates a lot of caregivers. Obviously, it would frustrate anybody. And so I always say, look, if you had to go to court and the judge has appointed you, then good news, you've been picked by the judge. Even better is if your loved one actually goes ahead and does the documents. Get the documents in place, and then guess what? When the strange family members come calling, and they will, and they start telling you what you ought to do and blah, blah, you can look at them and say, well, you know what? That's not what we feel like is best. That's not what our best option is. So this is what we're going to do. There is a lot of stress relief, like we just said, in being empowered by being prepared. But even in the situation where people are not, like I say, you have the option to go to a judge and be named the court-appointed person that can take care of the loved one that needs it. The trouble with that, and again, an argument for doing it ahead of time, is because it is expensive and it takes time. And so while you're going through all of that, what if something happens and they need somebody to make a decision immediately? That decision is going to wind up being left up to their doctor. And it's like, this may be a doctor who has or has not ever seen them before, or maybe it's their family doctor who's just going to have to take their best guess based on, well, this is what I know and I think they'd like. Nobody wants to be in that position. So I always tell the most empowered you can be is to be prepared ahead of time. But for the people that are not, I always want to say, look, let me encourage you. It is not the end of the world if you don't have this. It's just going to be a different journey that you're going to have to walk to get there.
Most definitely. And so Leah, before we go off this morning, you have your book, The Goodnight Suite, A Caregiver's Long Goodbye, but you also have, or coming soon,
Yes.
is the companion guide and an online course. So I'm super excited to see that when it comes out. And so how can someone find that or kind of keep an eye on when it's available?
Well, the first thing, the book is available right now. It is on Amazon. You can go to Amazon. Barnes & Noble has it. There are several online bookstores that have it where you can order it directly. And the online course and the companion guide, they have, I laughed, I sent my victory lap, was literally just last week. I actually finally got it sent to the publisher, and that's always a good feeling. So the publisher now has it. It is going through the editing process, and hopefully the good news, the online course will be just that. It's online. So there's not going to have to be the time waiting for a paper copy to be published. So that will be, as soon as that is made available, I will have that information on my website and how you can go about getting that. And that will be leahstanley.com.
Perfect. All right. Well, Leah, it's so good to see you again. And you have a good holidays, and we will talk to you soon.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Life Happens with Kim Hegwood. Be sure to tune in every Thursday at 10 a.m. wherever you listen to your podcast as we navigate through the challenges that emerge as life happens. The content of this podcast does not establish an attorney-client relationship or constitute attorney-client privilege, legal, medical, financial, or any other professional advice.